to the Bristol Break-up Club with Stowe Family Law and me, Claire Black, divorce coach. We're a welcoming club set up a couple of years ago to provide support for anybody navigating their way through a breakup or a divorce in a safe and friendly environment with other people who are going through the same experience. So thank you all for coming along today. Quick introductions. My name's Claire Black. I'm a breakup and divorce coach. I support my clients through the emotional ups and downs of breakup so that you can move through it with confidence and dignity and strength. I'm a qualified coach and a single divorced mum to 2 teenage boys. Stowe Family Law are the largest specialist family law firm in the UK, and they have offices all over the country. They work really hard to provide the best possible service for all of their clients, and they collaborate with lots of other professionals like myself and Stephanie, who we'll meet in a minute, to give a bespoke service for to meet the needs of each client. Excuse me. Today they're represented by Lucy Chandler and Lauren Roche, so thank you very much for coming along. And lastly, but definitely not least, we have Stephanie Bettis, who is the owner of Kilsaran Financial Planning. Stephanie has over 20 years experience in financial services and works with clients through divorce to help them make the right financial decisions for their future. She looks at all kinds of things like pensions, investments, mortgages, family protection, anything financial. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You can ask questions if you want to via the chat button or also through the Q&A. Just be aware that on the Q&A, if you click on panelists, it will come to us only, but if you click on everybody, everyone in the on the webinar will be able to see. So just be wary of that. So yeah, any questions, just put them in the chat and we'll answer them as we go through. So we're here today to talk about keeping calm and so on through divorce. I'm going to share some slides. So I'll just open that up now. If one of you guys could give me a thumbs up when it appears, that would be fantastic. Perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah, as I said, I'm Claire Black. I'm a breakup and divorce coach, an NLP practitioner, used to be a lawyer in a former life. I've been divorced twice now. I might talk about that a little bit later on. I'm a single mum of 2 teenagers, and I'm also the author of a book, Breakup from Crisis to Confidence. So the aims of all my coaching really is based around these 7 things. So I call them the 7 C's. First one is to concentrate on you, to shift the focus away from your ex and concentrate on yourself. Secondly, to become calm. So today I'm going to share some strategies to help you get calm in what can be a very turbulent time. To get clarity, and that means getting information, knowledge, clarity around all the things that probably scare you about the future and what this process might look like. To focus on what you can control rather than what you can't, because this is where your power really lies. To see options and choices, because the choices that you make now, and those might be choices about how you behave, about your intentions, about the decisions that you make, they will affect what happens to you leading on from this process. And then communicating more effectively, so strategies to be calm, to be clear, to be considered, and also ultimately to create a new and vibrant future that you're excited about living and that you're proud of. That's just a bit of background. Fundamentally, I believe that it isn't what happened to you that makes the difference. It's what you do with what happens to you that matters. And it's our choices about what happens to us that define who we are and what our life looks like moving forward. So today I'm going to share some strategies to help you feel calm and get back in control. I know from my own experience that divorce can be like a train crash. My first divorce in particular was one of the most traumatic things that's ever happened to me. Whether you choose divorce or not, it can derail your whole life. Everything is up in the air. It can turn your life upside down. And I remember my first divorce was very sudden and very unexpected. It was one of those bolt out of the blue situations. My husband came home one evening and told me that he'd met someone else and that for him, our marriage was over. So it felt exactly like this scene here, that train crash. It was one of the most challenging things that I've ever been through. A bit like being on a massive roller coaster with big ups and big downs. And I could feel fine one minute and then totally thrown the next. Angry one day, sad the next day. And lots of worries and fears. What I know now is that this is all completely normal. It's part of the process, perhaps, of going through any separation. My second divorce was my choice, so it was rather different to the first one. We didn't have any children together, which perhaps made it a little bit easier, but still life was a bit like it was being derailed, and I often questioned my decision in the early days. So how do you get calm and feel back more in control? Some of the feelings that I have experienced through my 2 divorces, and perhaps you're feeling some of these, they can change from day to day. You might feel betrayed, you might feel lonely, perhaps you feel vulnerable or confused or hopeless or lost. All of these things are really, really normal. And I think it helps to understand that you're going through a grieving process. So I talk a lot about what I prefer to call a healing cycle. When you're going through a divorce, you're going through a loss, a grieving process. And in the late 1960s, a psychologist, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, identified 5 main stages in loss. And she was talking about bereavement, but it's now widely accepted that these apply as well to going through a divorce or separation. So those main stages start with denial. This isn't happening to me. Everything's going to go back to normal. I'll wake up tomorrow and everything will be all right. And if you've chosen the divorce, this might be a phase that you've already been through before you make the decision. The second stage is anger. This isn't fair. How dare he or she do this to me? This stage has a lot of energy in it, but it can sometimes be unproductive, and it can perhaps lead you to do things that you might later regret. Then there's that bargaining phase. This one I experienced massively in my second divorce. This phase is kind of, if only I could do this, it would all work out. Or if only he would change, it would all be okay. Or if I had been a better wife or a funnier person or more sexy or whatever, things would be okay. The fourth stage is depression. So these are the days when you wake up and you think, I just don't want to get out of bed today. This is a normal part of going through this loss cycle. It doesn't mean that you're going to suffer from depression forever. It just means that you're going through a transition that's painful. And then finally, you reach acceptance. And that doesn't mean that you're necessarily happy about what's happened, but it means you can live with it and you can move forward accepting that it's part of your story. The important thing to remember in this cycle is that everyone will work through this cycle at different speeds and in different ways. It's not a direct journey, and you might experience these stages in different orders, in different intensities, and you might swirl around. You might swirl around 2 or 3 of these stages in a morning. You'll circle between them. Some people miss one stage out, and it's all okay and it's all normal. So this grieving process and this healing process are really individual. So please be reassured that whatever it is that you're feeling, it's normal. And it's also worth probably remembering that your spouse or your ex-spouse will be somewhere on this as well. Probably not in the same space as you at the same time, but they will be going through this too. So it's not surprising then when you're going through a divorce that things can happen that might throw you. One of my clients described the kind of curveballs that divorce can throw as being a bit like playing a game of whack-a-mole. This is children's game where the little heads pop up and you have to hit them with a hammer. And going through her divorce felt to her a little bit like that. Every time she solved one problem, another problem popped up. Every time she dealt with one feeling, another feeling popped up. And I knew what she meant. Every time something happens, it can throw you into a spin. It can send stress hormones around your body, adrenaline flooding through your body, put your your imagination into overdrive, and your belly perhaps into knots. So I think it's really important to understand what's happening in your brain when this happens. So our brains are wired to spot threat and react to secure our survival and our self-preservation. So the neocortex is the rational thinking part of your brain. It problem solves, it's where your conscious thought takes place, it's where your language is, it weighs up pros and cons of the situation. Emotional or feeling brain is the part of your brain that acts on emotions. It tells you when something doesn't feel right. And then the reptilian brain is responsible for survival. This is the part that is responsible for making you breathe, helping you swallow, and all of those things. Now, the emotional brain is the part of your brain that reacts automatically to a threat. It wants to keep you safe. And when it's triggered, it can overpower the logical thinking part of your brain. So when your emotional brain is triggered, perhaps an email arrives or your ex says something that riles you, you might find that your heart beats faster, the adrenaline rises, you might feel angry, perhaps you can't think straight, you see red, there's a red mist that descends, or you perhaps burst into tears. And your brain will respond to those in one of 4 ways generally: fight, flight, freeze, or flop, or sometimes that's called fawn as well. So when you're faced with an imminent danger, like, for example, I don't know, a lorry that's racing towards you, this response is really, really useful, because you don't need your logical brain at that point to go, shall I stand here and wait for this to hit me, or shall I run that way, or shall I run that way? It's too late for them. So your emotional brain will tell you to release cortisol. It will enable you to react quickly to danger without needing to stop and think. Once that danger has passed, then the adrenaline and cortisol will reduce and normality can return. But this isn't quite so useful when you're going through a divorce, because the causes of your stressing or your stress might be things that are happening all the time: an email popping in, fear of what the future looks like, perhaps, having to tell another person what's happening. So you can end up in a state of high anxiety a lot of the time. That fight response in a divorce might look like shouting or criticizing or refusing to listen, and it can end up in high conflict situations. The flight response might look like withdrawing or being silent or stonewalling or refusing to enter into discussion. The freeze response might look like ignoring the problem or pretending it's not happening or hoping it will go away on its own. And flop or fawn will look like perhaps giving in, giving up, capitulating, and trying to appease. So how can you get in control of these emotions? Well, the first step I will say is to identify what those emotions are. So can you identify what your feelings are? And I often use this emotions wheel, which I'm more than happy to send on to you, Kate, if you want to distribute this with tomorrow with the recording. If you can start to identify your feelings, then it starts to take their power away, because feelings are a bit like visitors that come knocking on your door. They knock, and if you don't let them in, they knock louder. And if you don't let them in still, they knock even louder, and eventually they kind of burst through. So the first step to taking back control of your feelings is to identify what they are. And once you've identified what your feelings are, you can start to surf them. This is one of my favourite strategies to help people to come to terms and to feel calmer about their feelings. So when you feel a wave of emotion coming towards you, imagine that you're a surfer and you are on your surfboard and you're paddling out to sea. You can see this wave. Now, the wave might be big, it might be small. The first thing to do is identify what the wave is. So identify what that wave is, and then turn your board and imagine that you are riding that wave towards the shore. Let that emotion wash over you. Let yourself feel it. Remind yourself that the wave always breaks. It always breaks and lands on the beach. So you might want to cry, you might want to shout, you might want to hit pillows, whatever it is. If you're in a safe place, just let it out. And then as you feel the emotions starting to wane, which it always does because emotions are always transitory, imagine that you're coming towards the shore. Imagine that the wave breaks and you land on the beach. Breathe slowly in and out. Imagine the sand between your feet. Imagine the sun on your back. Feel yourself drying off. And then you can rest for a few minutes and just allow your breathing to come back to normal. And notice how it feels to be on the beach. That feeling has passed, the wave has stopped, and you always, always land safe on the beach. And then remember that your breath is more powerful than your thoughts. So in those moments when your brain perhaps feels overwhelmed with 1,000 thoughts and questions, your breath is one of the most powerful things that you've got in your toolkit to help bring calm. And it's a resource that's free and it's always with you. With breathing, you can slow down your heart rate, you can calm your thoughts, and you can take time to think. When you breathe slowly and deeply, you also bring oxygen back into your bloodstream and your brain, and that helps to calm those emotional responses. So I often say to my clients, your breath is more powerful than your thoughts. If you can breathe in and count to 5, hold your breath for 2, and then breathe out and count to 7, and then repeat that. So breathing in and count to 5, hold for 2, and out for 7. You'll notice that while you breathe and you count, you can't think at the same time. So this strategy will help stop those swirling thoughts. Your brain can't think and count at the same time, so your thoughts can no longer swirl around and your breath would have overpowered them. And just notice when you do that, how much calmer you feel. And I found this really useful in my divorce, and it led me to create this little mantra that I stuck up across my fridge. Stop, breathe, think before I respond or act. I found this so useful because it stopped me replying quickly and angrily to emails. It stopped me from having an angry outburst at something that my ex-husband might say. So by reminding yourself to stop and breathe before you think or respond, before you respond or you act, you're taking back power over your emotions and you're bringing your logical brain back on side. And you might be sitting there thinking, yes, but when that reaction comes, I don't have time to stop and breathe. Or how will I remember to do that? And perhaps you feel that those emotional reactions that you have are just too strong. You see red and you act instinctively. So how can you control that? I promise you that you can. The first time will always be the hardest. But once you've done it once, and then every time you do it afterwards, the easier it becomes. So perhaps have a think back over the last few weeks. Are there any times when these breathing strategies would have come useful? And what difference would it have made if you'd stopped to breathe before you responded? Once you've got your emotional sort of brain back under control with your breathing, then you can start to think about what you can control and what you can't. This is one of my favourite little diagrams. I give it to almost all my clients. So the things that you can control are in blue in the middle. You can control your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviour, your decisions, your body language, all of those things. What you can't control is in that orange zone, and I call that the orange zone of frustration. So you can't control someone else's thoughts, feelings, actions, ideas, reactions, behaviours, etc. And often we focus on trying to control precisely the things that are outside of our control. So I wonder how many times have you thought, I wish I could just get my ex to understand this, or I wish I could just get him or her to see this from my perspective. You're in that zone of frustration at that point. So if you can, bring yourself back, remind yourself, what can I control? Those are the things that are within your power. So the first question I always ask myself once I've got my emotional brain back and in control is, what can I do? What choices do I have? What are my options? And that helps me to get back into that zone of control. Just some things that you can control that are quite simple, some of them, but they make a massive difference. So you can, for example, control what you watch on TV. Stop watching really heavy drama, stop watching things that make you feel worse, and start watching things which perhaps lift you up. Similarly with music, if you find yourself listening to lots of sad love songs, or your favourite song that you used to listen to with your ex, that's going to take you into a downward spiral. So listen to music that perhaps lifts you, that makes you feel better, that comforts you. You can also control what you look at on social media. So looking at your ex's profile on social media, and I was talking about this with a client just today, can make you feel really awful. The client I was talking to today had seen on her ex's Instagram page pictures of him and his new girlfriend, pictures of him and his new girlfriend and their children at the weekend. Now, that might be really inappropriate, but unfortunately you can't control it. But what you can do is control whether you look at it or not. And you can also control whether you ask your friends not to tell you about it, for example. You can also control who you spend time with. So spend time with people who help you to feel better. Spend time with your radiator friends, the ones that help you and support you and who you know have your back. And you can also control what you wear. Now, I found this really important, particularly in my first divorce, when I was feeling vulnerable. I would make sure that every time I had to see my ex-husband to hand over the children or have a meeting or whatever, I made sure that I wore something that made me feel good, that made me feel confident. So don't put on your mankiest tracksuit every morning, because that will make you feel worse. Put on something that helps you to feel better, even if it's just the underwear that you've got on underneath what you're wearing on top. And then you can control the questions that you ask in your head. And this is really fundamental, I think. Your brain is like Google, I would say, so ask it really good questions. When you ask Google a question, Google will go through all its algorithms, it will go through all the information it's got and come up with answers. And your brain is similarly. So if you ask your brain things like, what did I do to deserve this? Or why do I feel so miserable? Or why is this happening to me? Or why was I not good enough? Or why do I feel so bad? And perhaps you recognize those questions. And I've been down all of those rabbit holes. Your brain will start to answer those questions, and their answers won't help you to feel any better. So on this slide, I've put a list of much better, more empowering questions that you could perhaps start asking yourself instead. What have I overcome before, and how could I reuse those resources now? We all have lots of resources that we can draw on, but we tend to forget what they are. So remind yourself about other times when you've perhaps faced something difficult and what you did to overcome it. What am I grateful for today? Focusing on the good stuff in your life. It's really easy to focus on all the bad stuff that's happening and forget about some of the good things. My favourite question on this is, if there was one tiny upside to this, what would it be? And that's because I believe there is always, always an upside. It might be tiny. So for me, in the really early days of my first divorce, one of the big upsides was that I could cook with ginger. My ex-husband detests ginger, and in fact, it makes him a bit sick. So I love ginger. I actually grate raw ginger on my breakfast. I'm that much of a fan of it. So I could start to cook with ginger in a way that I'd always wanted to and couldn't before. So just that tiny upside helped me to feel a little bit more empowered, a little bit better. And I've had some really interesting answers to that when I've asked clients that question, ranging from one guy said to me, now that my wife is no longer here, I can turn the light on in the ensuite when I go to the loo in the middle of the night. She never let me, and now I can do that. Right up to a client who said, I can feel safe now in my own home. So there are always upsides, and it's about training your brain to find them. You can program your brain to do that. One thing to notice is that all these questions are focused on you. So that goes right back to what I was saying at the beginning, focusing on you rather than focusing on your ex. So 5 steps really in summary to help you to find calm and feel more in control. First of all, identify what it is you're feeling. Then surf those feelings and land on the beach and use your breath to bring calm. And then look at what you can control rather than what you can't. And then take power over your brain and ask yourself really empowering questions. And I'm going to stop sharing now, if I can. I'll wake my mouse up. There we go. Brilliant. Okay. So I don't know if there are any questions that have come into the chat, or if any of you guys, Lauren and Lucy, if you have anything that you'd like to add to any of that, or any advice that you give your clients, perhaps when they come to see you, or Steph indeed. Lucy.
Yeah, it's thank you, Claire. That was really helpful. I think, as you've described, going through this process, it's extremely challenging. No one, goes through the process, and we don't, for one moment think, coming to a solicitor and getting advice, it's a really difficult step. And it's about knowing that going through the process, there will be challenges, there will be ups and downs, and you've got support there to guide you through that process. You can't tackle everything yourself. You're not going to know the answers to absolutely everything. Having, the support from someone like you, Claire, to help navigate some of the emotional parts of that journey is so important. Having a solicitor that's on hand to tackle and answer the legal side of those things, it's usually fundamental.
Yeah, and I mean, having, I didn't mention it in my presentation, but having a really good support network around you is absolutely fundamental. So I always think of this as being like, you know, if you sit on a stool and you take one of the legs away, it will fall over. So you need to get your legal advice in place, your emotional support if you need it in place, your financial support if you need it from somebody like Stephanie in place, so that you can really have the right advice at the right time from the right people. That will help give you clarity about the steps that you need to take.
And just off the back of that, Claire, that's a really, really good point, and that's something I always advise my clients, is to take things away and think them through, because your emotions are so important and you need that support from others. And there's nothing wrong with reaching out and asking for help, because you're going through a really difficult time. There's lots of things to manage, there's lots of change going on, and sometimes it is worth just sitting down with a cup of tea and taking 5 minutes to process that emotion and those thoughts and those feelings that you're having, to help you make rational decisions moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's something come up in the chat. I'll have a quick look. Okay, yeah, so how do I deal with perhaps the feeling of people are making the decision, and how do you deal with that feeling of feeling guilty about having made that decision? I see this a lot in clients, and actually went through this myself, and particularly my second divorce. And I felt terribly guilty that I was causing pain to somebody who was close to me. I think part of it comes down to that control thing. You know, what are you actually responsible for? And fundamentally, I'm responsible for my happiness. I'm not responsible for somebody else's happiness. And so I think that's really important to keep right at the forefront of your mind, that you're responsible for your happiness, and you need to put your own happiness at the top of the pile, as it were. And I see lots of clients who are very used to putting their own needs at the bottom of the pile. And as a mum, I've done that myself. You know, you put yourself to the bottom. And actually, it's really important to remember that you need to put your own oxygen mask on first and make yourself happy before you can even think about making other people happy. So I spend quite a lot of time helping clients work through that feeling of guilt. And I think there are two types of guilt. There's helpful guilt and there's unhelpful guilt. So helpful guilt is that guilt where perhaps you do something that's against your moral code, or you do something you know is the wrong thing to do, and you can make amends for it. So you can apologize, or you can make it better, or you can put it right. That's helpful guilt. Unhelpful guilt is the kind of guilt that is like a dead weight, that doesn't take you anywhere productive, that just makes you feel bad and perhaps makes you feel shame. That guilt is not helpful. And that's the guilt to work on letting go. And I work with clients a lot on letting go. And in each individual case, it's very different, but we look at what causes that guilt and then think about how you can look at it differently. And fundamentally, I think it comes down to you need to make yourself happy. Something else that has cropped up as well. Okay, so so how can I calm or support my children who are affected by my split? So the first thing, I suppose, is to think about how you tell your children that this is happening and the message that you give to them at that point. I think it's really important to make sure that you reassure children that this isn't anything to do with them, that you both still love them and that you're both going to still be there for them as parents. And teaching your children some of the strategies that I've talked about. So you can teach your children strategies for breathing. One really useful one that's really simple to show children is using your hand. So you can use your hand and you breathe in as you go up your finger, breathe out as you go down, breathe in as you go up, out as you go down, and so on. And you can do that as many times as you need to feel calm. Or encourage your children to draw out their feelings, or perhaps act out their feelings with dolls or whatever it might be, some role play. And make sure that you're listening and perhaps checking in with them. I saw a really good little tip on I think it was on TikTok recently, saying that there are 3 questions that you can ask your children. Number 1 is, what's your word? So what's your one word that describes how you feel today? The second question is, what's your number? So out of 10, how do you feel? With 10 being I'm on top of the world and 1 being I feel awful. And then the third question is there anything you want to talk about? And if there isn't anything they want to talk about, then you leave it at that, because I think it's really important that children don't feel pressured perhaps into talking, but they need to know that you're there to listen. So those 3 questions I thought were really brilliant to use with children to help them to find calm and to give them some reassurance. Steph, I think there's a question for you. Hang on a second. Let me see. Okay, so my partner always controlled the finances in our marriage, and now I'm having to face managing those on my own. What advice can you give me about budgeting?
In relation to the budgeting, I suppose some of this stems into what you're trying to achieve, because what I find sometimes is, you know, when you're speaking to clients going through divorce, they can only live within their means, because some will come from a, you know, the background where they've had quite, you know, they've had joint incomes and they've had a lot of holidays and different things, and then suddenly they find themselves in a position where some of the things that they would have enjoyed having, they can't do that anymore. So it's really important for individuals going through that to actually sit down, you know, don't bury your head in the sand with this, work out what exactly you have got and what the priorities are for you and your family, and then sit down and actually work out, you know, is that affordable? And if it's not, you know, I've had clients that have had to, you know, go full time. They've had to change some of the things that their lifestyle to be able to achieve the things that they want in life. And you know, that's, you know, it's not a nice situation to be in, because you're going through an emotional, horrendous time. But those are the things that are really important, that you do consider the budget, you do consider what's a reality check, what is important. And sometimes the nice to have things, you do have to put them to the side until maybe it's you know, a different time period in life where they become affordable. Because for a lot of people, it's about paying the mortgage, paying the rent, paying the bills, you know, making sure the kids are taken care of, and the nicer things maybe have to be put to the side.
Yeah, thank you. Lucy, Lauren, is there anything you would like to add to that around sort of budgeting, and perhaps a little bit of, I know that the for me is often really terrifying for a lot of my clients. So are there any sort of top tips you've got for perhaps completing that form?
Yeah, I think it's to work through it logically. And if you get stuck, your solicitor is there to help. Ask as many questions as you need to. Never be afraid to ask anything. There's no silly questions. We've heard it all and seen it all. And at the end of the day, we'd rather you ask than sit there and struggle. But the For Me, when you receive it, it comes through in a chronological order, if you like, and you can follow through the steps that you need. And there's little kind of guidance boxes at the top of each stage. Some parts won't be relevant to you, so if you have a printed copy, sometimes that helps. You can scribble things down that I need to look at this account, or I ignore this section. But ask as many questions as you need, and perhaps sit down of an evening with a pen and paper, if that's how you work best, and work through with a list, if that works for me. And you will get there in the end. It's not as bad as it may first look.
I think one of the other things, as well as I was talking to a client about this today, she's halfway through doing her For Me, and she thought that she had to hand it back to her solicitor in absolutely perfect form. And I was saying to her, no, I don't think that's right. I think you can do your best, hand it over, and they may well have questions, and you might have to find some more stuff, but it doesn't have to be perfect the first time you pass it over to your solicitor. I think lots of clients get really stressed by that whole For Me, so taking it one step at a time.
That's it, one step at a time. And even if it's kind of handwritten squiggles on the form, we can work on that and ask as many questions as we need equally back to you to help you fit it in. It's just to give us an idea of what we need and where we need to point our questions.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Can I just add one other thing as well, just to that? One of the other things that I see quite a lot is, if, you know, don't just, if you've got a mortgage, you know, make sure you're having a review of that. If you've got utility bills, make sure you are having a review of that. You know, there's so many times where people are paying for things that they're paying way over the odds for, that actually, you know, if you speak to someone like myself, we probably have connections that will be able to put you in touch with, to actually review some of these utilities, mortgages, life covers, you know, all these other things you might have, you might not actually need going forward.
One thing that actually just sprang into my mind while you were talking there, Steph, as well, is you know, if your spouse moves out, then you may be able to apply for a reduction in your council tax and things like that.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, and having a look and see whether there's any benefits, for example, that you may become applicable for, and all those kinds of things. So that's where talking to somebody like Stephanie would be really handy to give you real clarity, which helps then to bring that calm we're looking for. Quick question has popped in. So I feel really overwhelmed by all of everything that's in front of me. Have you got any practical tips to deal with that overwhelm? Okay. So yeah, all the tips we've talked about so far in terms of breathing and you know, lowering those stress levels. But something that I do often with my clients is we get a big piece of A3 paper and we spend 5 minutes literally brain dumping. So we brain dump all the things that are worrying them onto that piece of paper. And so we make this sort of spider diagram, if you like. And then we look at each of those in turn and we ask a series of questions. So the first question is this within my control? So any of these ones that are not within your control, we put a big line through. We can put them off the list because actually you can't do anything about that. The second question might be, can I delegate this? So some of the things you could actually ask someone else to do, or you could ask someone else to help with. Then the third question is, what kind of help do I need with this? So who do I need to ask for help if I need help? Do I need to ask my lawyer this question? Or is this a question for my financial advisor? Or is this a question that a friend could answer? And then lastly, anything that's left, we look at and I ask, what are 1 or 2 small steps that you could take to move this forward or to feel more in control of this? And by the end, actually what we've created is a kind of dump list, delegate list, and a to-do list. And that can really help people to feel much more in control of everything that's happening to them. I had a client once actually who did a brilliant thing. She got a roll of wallpaper and she felt really overwhelmed by the court process. Her case was going to court. And so she got this roll of wallpaper that was really long, and she wrote at the top today's date, and then she wrote the dates of all her hearings, and then she wrote the things that she needed to do for each hearing in between each one. And then as they went by, she kind of ripped the top of the wallpaper off and gradually moved it over a kind of easel thing. I thought that was a fantastic idea. So be inventive, try and think of different ways in which you can break things down, because chunking things down is always a really good idea to feel less overwhelmed by everything.
Just to, sorry Claire, if I can add on that as well.
Yeah, please do.
In terms of not wanting to feel overwhelmed, we absolutely don't want clients to feel overwhelmed during the process, and it can absolutely feel completely overwhelming. We absolutely understand that. And there are some clients where, we'll have conversations with them and they might be times in the day that they prefer to receive emails, for example. If they really struggle, first thing in the morning, seeing some emails from a solicitor, that can feel, too much. So we'll agree, right, is there a better time for you to be able to cope and sit down and look at things that might be coming in? Or it might be that we agree to have sort of a weekly call. So even if things haven't necessarily happened, it's just that touch base with that client to make sure that they know things are on track. This is what's coming this week. This is what we need your instructions on. So we can really try and work with the clients to make it, as comfortable a process as it can be. There are certain things that come in and we do need urgent instructions on. If you're in court proceedings, things can move quickly and things might come in unexpectedly, but as far as we can, if there is a client that's struggling and it does feel completely overwhelming, we'll have a conversation. Let's manage it as best we can with you. So those are sort of things that we would absolutely sort of look to make sure we're dealing with as well from our point of view.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's a really good idea, taking control of that, the timings of things. And actually that's reminded me, quite often I talk to clients about what I call the 24-hour rule. So when an email comes in that perhaps gives rise to a strong emotion, perhaps angry or sad or whatever it might be, leave it for 24 hours and sleep on it. Your brain, while you're asleep, does a lot of processing. and while you're asleep, it will be processing what you've read. So I always suggest you read it once, you put it to the side, you sleep on it, and then in the morning look at it again, or the next day look at it again, and don't respond until 24 hours has elapsed. You can also take control of things like that by, for example, if Lucy, you're sending your client a copy of a letter from the solicitor for the other side, as it were, print it out, get a pen, put a black line through anything that you don't need to respond to, and just highlight questions that you do need to answer, so that you're breaking down what you actually need to respond to in an email. Because sometimes, particularly if you're looking at emails directly from your ex-partner, there might be things in there that are perhaps personal attacks or unpleasant things that actually don't need a response at all, and you can just kind of put a line straight through them. So taking control of your inbox and taking control of what goes out of it, I think is really important. And you can't always control what comes in, but you can absolutely control what goes out and how you deal with what comes in. There's a question. Oh, sorry, go on, Laura. Sorry.
I was going to say, Claire, that I think just following on from those comments, I think sometimes it's easy for us to identify when somebody is struggling or might need some support, whether that's practically or emotionally. And sometimes it's not as easy to identify, and that leads to people feeling frustrated. If you feel that we aren't, or people aren't picking up, just say, I'm stuck, or I feel this way about this particular letter that I've received, or this particular step. Can you explain it to me again, or can we talk through it? So just say how you what support that you need, and how we can support you, and how your family and friends, lawyers, accountants, financial advisors, everybody's there for you. So just make sure that you use your support network as much as you need, or as little as you need as well, if you feel that you can control things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really, really important. Another thing that you can do actually is start to look at things in a slightly different way. So I talk about using your owl brain and wow brain quite often to clients. So if you imagine you're climbing a mountain and you get halfway up, Steph, this is going to be real for you in a minute, when you're going to go and climb Everest. When you're climbing a mountain and you get halfway up, you've got a choice. You can look up the mountain and say, ow, look how much I've still got to do, and it's going to be really difficult. Or you can look down the mountain and say, wow, look how far I've already come, and ask yourself, what did I do to get here? What skills have I got? What resources have I developed over that time? And how can I then use them to turn and take the next step up the mountain? So, looking for things where you are achieving, and looking for things where you're doing something that's worked, and then using that is also a really good thing to do moving through this process. There's a question in the Q&A. Okay. This is probably one for the lawyers. What should I do if I can't afford a solicitor? That's a tricky question. I know that there are people in that situation.
So there's a couple of different things that you can do. If there's domestic violence in your relationship and your assets fall into a certain category, you may be entitled to legal aid. So it's worth making those inquiries in the first instance to see if that's an avenue that you can explore. You can also represent yourself if you need to, albeit it's not a pleasant experience, I accept, but you can do that if that's what you need to do. There's also ways that you can access lawyers on a kind of a dip in and dip out basis. So if you needed somebody to represent you at a hearing, for example, you can access a barrister who will just come to that hearing with you, provide the advice and the representation that you need for that small part, and then come away again. So that can lower the costs quite significantly, albeit you'd have to do quite a lot of the legwork in the background.
Yeah. I don't know how useful things like systems advice and things are as well, places like that can give you advice at much more sort of, a very cost-effective way. And there are lots and lots of sites now on Facebook and Instagram and things like that, where there are some lawyers, for example, who give tips and things like that on Instagram or TikTok that you could probably follow and get some help directly from there. But maybe it's about dipping in and out, and so if you need a specific little bit of advice, see a lawyer for that, and then use that information. You don't have to use a lawyer for the whole part of it. And now that you can apply for just the divorce part online, you can do that bit yourself, but of course that doesn't settle your finances. Lucy?
Yeah, we're just touching on the divorce part. I'm seeing more and more clients actually sort of handling the divorce element themselves now, because it is a much more straightforward process, given the sort of change to the no fault system, and you know, that can be one way of sort of dealing with the expense and doing that part of it. But yes, you know, these, if you're in proceedings, you know, they can be expensive, and so having sort of ad hoc advice, maybe having an initial meeting with a solicitor so you have a general understanding of what the processes are, how the courts sort of look at things, and then if you know you're going to have a conversation with your partner, or you might be going into mediation, at least you've had that initial meeting with a solicitor to have some basic awareness of what you can then go into having those discussions, like I say, either with the partner directly or maybe through the mediation process. But taking advice early, I often think is really helpful. It might feel really daunting, and you might not think you want to waste that expense early on if you think you can, you know, try and sort things out yourself. But it's usually really beneficial. You know, you don't have to commit to using a solicitor then the whole way through, but having some initial input can often be, you know, can answer some questions that you might have, or explain things that you didn't know, and make you view things in a slightly different way than you might already be thinking or have concerns about.
Yeah, that's really helpful advice. And I guess, you know, some people may not realise that you can dip in and out of using a solicitor. You don't have to use a solicitor for absolutely every step of the way. So that's really helpful. Thank you. Somebody's asked about tips for dealing with feeling really lonely. Now, I totally get this. Going through a divorce can be a very lonely place to be. We've talked about the importance of creating a support network. I think one of the other things to do is to have a think about what you enjoy. What do you enjoy doing? In an ideal world, what would you like to be involved in? Do you enjoy, I don't know, do you enjoy cycling? Do you enjoy running? Do you enjoy flower arranging? Do you enjoy singing? Do you enjoy acting or music, or whatever it is that you enjoy? And although it might feel like a really brave thing to do and a really challenging thing to do, maybe find a group that does some of those things that you enjoy. You know, join the Ramblers, or join a local choir, or join a book group, or anything that you can experience doing something that you enjoy with other people. Because my experience tells me that as you go through a divorce, it's really interesting when you get to the end, who are your friends, the number of new friends that you meet kind of along the way. You know, after my first divorce, I decided to buy a bike and I started cycling, and now I belong to a club and I go cycling at weekends, and I've got friends through that now. And I also went to learn to dance and dance La Rock, jive dancing. And I learned that because I decided I wanted to do it, and I went along by myself, and it was, all these places are really welcoming when you go along. So think of some things that you like doing and feel the fear and do it anyway, and go along and try some of them out. So that would be the big thing. It's really about reconnecting with yourself and what you enjoy and what you like doing. And if you find, for example, it really challenging to, you know, some people end up being really, really busy trying to avoid that feeling of loneliness. Maybe set yourself a bit of a challenge. You know, today I'm going to stay at home and watch TV by myself for half an hour, and then I'm going to see somebody. Or, you know, so set yourself little challenges that can help you handle that. But also know that it will pass. Know that this period of time, when you look back in 5 years, this will be a moment in time of your life. It's not going to last forever. It will pass. And if you start to take control of your life and you start to do some of those things that you enjoy doing, you'll make that journey just that little bit quicker and easier for yourself. So look and see if there's anything else popped up. I don't think so. So is there anything that anybody else or any of you guys would like to add to what we've already said? Otherwise we'll draw to a close, and we'll see you all again next time. So anything that anybody wants to add to what we've already said? Brilliant. Okay. Well, I hope that you have all found the strategies that we've suggested useful. Go away and try them out. You know, maybe you're thinking, oh, those strategies won't work for me, but go and try them. And if they don't work, you can always go back to how you were before. But if they do work, then you'll learn a really new strategy to help you move forward. And they've helped. I know that they've helped me get through 2 divorces, and I know that they help my clients. So give them a go, and good luck. And if you want to contact any of us after the session, then please do that. I think Kate's going to send out some details tomorrow. Is that right, Kate? Yeah, perfect. And Kate, I'll send you copies of the slides as well, so you can send that out too, so people have got those.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Claire.
Perfect. All right. Thank you ever so much for coming along, everybody, and I hope you found it useful. And we'll see you again at the next meeting of the Bristol Break-up Club. Thank you very much.